This happened during my sophomore year when I volunteered to help set up for the winter formal. It wasn't punishment exactly, though it felt like one. I'd signed up because my girlfriend was on the decorations committee, and I thought it would be an easy way to spend time with her. What I didn't know was that she had switched to the refreshment committee last minute, leaving me alone in the gymnasium with 3 other students and a substitute teacher named Ms. Gable. The regular faculty sponsor had called in sick. Ms. Gable taught biology, I think, or maybe chemistry. She was younger than most teachers, probably in her late 20s, and she spent most of the morning on her phone at the scorer's table while we hung crepe paper and tested the lighting board. The gym felt enormous with just the 4 of us in it. Empty bleachers on both sides, the basketball hoops folded up against the rafters like sleeping bats. I knew 2 of the other volunteers. Derek was in my English class, quiet, always drawing in his notebook. The other was a senior named Paula who I recognized from track. The 4th person I didn't know, a guy with a shaved head and a Letterman jacket from a different school. He'd transferred in that week, someone said, though nobody seemed to know his name. We started at 9. Ms. Gable told us we could leave by noon if we finished the backdrop and strung the lights. I worked on the paper streamers while Derek focused on the sound system. Paula and the transfer student were supposed to arrange the tables along the far wall. He didn't talk much, just nodded when Paula asked him to hand her things. Around 10:30, Ms. Gable stood up and stretched. She said she needed to check something in the supply closet across the hall, that she'd be right back. The transfer student watched her walk out. A minute later, he stood up and followed her. Derek looked at me. I shrugged and went back to the streamers. The fire alarm went off at 10:47. We knew the drill, even though it was Saturday. Exit through the nearest doors, assemble on the south lawn, wait for the all clear. But Ms. Gable had the keys to the gym. The main doors were locked from the outside, and the emergency exits would trigger a different alarm if we used them. We stood there for a moment, listening to the shrill ringing, unsure if it was real or another system test. Then the lights went out. Not the emergency lighting. Everything. The gym dropped into complete darkness except for the pale rectangles of the high windows. Derek found the flashlight on his phone. Paula's voice came from somewhere near the bleachers, asking what we should do. I said we should probably stay put until Ms. Gable came back. She had to have keys. She had to be somewhere nearby. We heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy running. Then silence. Derek's flashlight swept across the floor. I walked toward the gym doors and pressed my ear against the metal. Nothing at first. Then a sound I couldn't place, like something heavy being dragged, followed by a sharp click that might have been a door closing somewhere distant. Paula whispered that we should hide. We moved behind the bleachers. The 3 of us crouched in the dark among folding chairs and discarded athletic tape. The fire alarm had stopped. I checked my phone. No service. The school's Wi-Fi required a login that none of us had. 10 minutes passed. Maybe 15. I heard the gym doors rattle, like someone testing the handle. Derek's flashlight was off now. We were breathing too loudly, I thought. I tried to hold my breath. The rattle came again, then stopped. When the lights returned, they came back all at once, harsh and fluorescent. We stayed hidden until we heard Ms. Gable's voice calling our names. She was alone, disheveled, a smear of dust on her cheek. She said the alarm had been a malfunction, that the transfer student had left early without signing out, that we should finish up and go home. I saw the supply closet door standing open across the hall as we left. The window on it was cracked, a spiderweb pattern I hadn't noticed before. Ms. Gable locked it carefully, checking the handle twice. I never learned his real name. The winter formal was canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. Ms. Gable finished out the semester but didn't return the following year. Sometimes I still wonder what she saw in that hallway, and whether the footsteps I heard were running towards something or away. This happened a few years back during my junior year of college. One thing I should mention is that I went to a state university that was well known for having one of the oldest libraries in the region, a massive stone building with 7 floors of archives and study rooms that stayed open until 2 in the morning. The place had been built in the 1930s, so the heating system rattled constantly and the elevators groaned like they were considering retirement. There were usually only a few dozen students scattered across the whole building by midnight, which is when I preferred to study. As I would assume most other security incidents start, the night was pretty normal. I had finished my evening seminar, grabbed coffee from the cart near the humanities building, and walked over to the library to work on a research paper. I always studied on the 5th floor in the East Wing, where the regional history collection was kept. Most people avoided it because the lights were dimmer and the shelves blocked the Wi-Fi signal, but I liked the quiet. I was deep into a stack of old city directories when I realized I needed to use the bathroom. The nearest one was down a narrow hallway past the microfilm room, an area that had been partially renovated last year, but still felt like a basement. I gathered my things and walked down the corridor. The bathroom was empty except for one stall that was occupied. I did what I needed to do and was washing my hands when I heard the stall door open behind me. A woman stepped out who looked to be in her 50s, wearing a long tan coat that seemed too heavy for the season. She didn't look at me, just moved to the sink and started washing her hands slowly, methodically, like she was following a specific routine. I noticed she wasn't carrying any bags or books, which was strange for someone on this floor. Everyone up here was either a grad student buried in research or an archivist carrying document boxes. I dried my hands quickly and left without saying anything. Back at my table, I tried to focus on my work but kept glancing toward the hallway. After about 20 minutes, I heard the elevator ding from the main corridor, then another ding, then a third. That was odd. The elevators were slow and loud. You usually heard them coming from 2 floors away. 3 arrivals in quick succession meant multiple people were moving through the building who weren't taking the stairs. Then the lights flickered. Not the dramatic blackout you see in movies, just a brief dimming, like someone had hit a switch somewhere and immediately changed their mind. I looked around. The 5th floor had maybe 6 other students in sight, all of them looking up from their laptops with the same confused expression. A minute later, the intercom crackled to life, something I didn't even know the library had. A man's voice, not the usual security guard I recognized, announced that the building was now under emergency protocols and all occupants should remain in their current locations and await further instructions. We all looked at each other. A girl at the table near the window stood up and walked to the stairwell door, trying the handle. It didn't budge. Someone had engaged the magnetic locks remotely. She turned back to us with wide eyes. They're not supposed to do that unless, she started, but didn't finish. I was thinking about that woman in the bathroom, the one with the empty hands and the heavy coat. The East Wing bathroom was isolated, tucked away from the main corridors. Someone could hide there for hours without being noticed. We sat in silence for what felt like 10 minutes, but was probably only 3. Then we heard footsteps in the main hallway, moving with purpose but not running. Whoever it was stopped near the microfilm room. There was a pause, then the sound of a door being tested, handle jiggling, moving on to the next door. The girl by the window slid down to the floor, pulling her backpack in front of her like a shield. The footsteps came closer. They reached our corridor and stopped. Through the gap between the shelves, I could see a figure in dark clothing standing at the entrance to our study area, looking left and right. The woman from the bathroom. She was holding something in her right hand that I couldn't identify, some kind of tool or device. She took 2 steps into the room and stopped again, listening. I held my breath. The student next to me had tears running down her face, silent but steady. The woman turned and walked back out. We heard her continue down the hallway, testing more doors, moving toward the stairwell. Then we heard voices from the floor below, urgent and overlapping, followed by the sound of heavy boots on the stairs. Police or campus security or both. The magnetic locks clicked open with a sound like a gunshot, making half of us jump. An officer appeared in our doorway and told us to stay put while they cleared the building. We sat there for another hour before they escorted us out through the main entrance. Outside, the parking lot was filled with emergency vehicles, their lights painting the old stone walls in red and blue. They never told us exactly what happened. The official email the next day mentioned an unauthorized individual in the special collections area and thanked us for our patience. I checked the local news for weeks afterward and found nothing. I asked one of the librarians a month later, someone I'd known since freshman year, and she just shook her head and said they weren't allowed to discuss it. Sometimes I walk past that building at night and look up at the 5th floor windows. The lights are always on in the East Wing, even when the rest of the floor is dark. I wonder if they're still looking for whatever she was trying to find, or if she found it that night and simply walked away while the rest of us were trapped, waiting for someone to tell us it was safe to leave. I'm 23 and back at my old high school working as the theater department's lighting tech, which basically means I spend most of my time in the basement workshop beneath the auditorium stage. The rest of the basement is a disaster of broken flats and paint cans from 1987, but the shop itself is incredible proper workbenches, a vintage drafting table, a mini fridge stocked with energy drinks, and this industrial air filtration system that runs so quiet you forget it's there. The students upstairs sweat through August rehearsals while I work in actual comfort. I got the position because Ms. Halloway, my old drama teacher, fought for me. She saw me build a functioning lighthouse for our production of The Coast of Utopia senior year and decided I had practical genius. Her words. She's the reason I'm here instead of working retail. My shopmates Jenna and Omar had gone up to the cafeteria to grab lunch, leaving me alone wiring a new dimmer board around noon when the PA system crackled to life. It wasn't the usual bell tone. It was Principal Vance's voice, tight and strange, telling us we were under modified lockdown due to a chemical incident in the science wing and that everyone should stay in their current locations until hazmat cleared the building. No details on what chemical. No timeline. I turned off the work lights because the shop has this huge window looking into the basement corridor and I didn't want to be visible, though the door itself is just a heavy curtain on a rail, no actual lock. The main basement entrance had a keypad that hadn't worked since 2019. I texted Jenna and Omar, but got nothing back. I sat on my stool in the dark, listening to the filtration system hum its low steady note, playing solitaire on my phone for what felt like half an hour. Then I heard the stage door above me slam open, footsteps pounding down the concrete stairs, and someone retching violently in the hallway outside my shop. The curtain rippled from their movement. I slid off my stool and crawled under the drafting table, pressing myself against the wall where the floor meets the leg braces. The curtain slid aside. Whoever entered didn't turn on the lights. They stood there breathing, wet and ragged, and I could smell something sharp and metallic cutting through the filtered air. They took 3 steps toward my workbench and stopped. Silence again, except for their breathing and the hum of the vents. My phone buzzed against my thigh. I had it on silent, but the vibration might as well have been a scream. The footsteps turned toward the table. I squeezed my eyes shut and felt my throat close up, that absolute certainty that discovery meant something I couldn't name but couldn't survive. I rolled out from under the table with my hands already raised, whispering, "Please, I'm not supposed to be here. I don't know what's happening." A hand caught my wrist and hauled me up. It was a girl, maybe 16, wearing a lab coat over her jeans, her eyes red and streaming tears, her face flushed an ugly crimson. She looked at me with this desperate confusion and said, "It's in my lungs. I can feel it burning. Where's the nurse's office from here?" I told her we were underground. There was no nurse's office down here. We had to stay put. She shook her head and asked if there was another way out. A service tunnel, anything. I mentioned the old steam pipe access behind the boiler room, sealed but technically still on the evacuation maps from when this building was constructed. Before I could ask her name or what had happened upstairs, my phone lit up with Omar's message. "Dude, get out of the shop if you're still there. It's not a chemical spill. Girl in AP Chem lost it, smashed the safety shower and the fire extinguisher, sprayed something into the vents. She's saying she poisoned everyone. Cops think she's armed with glassware or something. She's wearing a lab coat. They're clearing floor by floor." I looked up. The girl had stopped moving. She was watching my face, watching the realization hit, and her expression shifted from panic to something flat and resigned. She took a step toward me and I bolted, knocking over a paint can as I scrambled for the corridor. Hearing her follow, hearing her say, "Wait, you don't understand. I didn't mean to. I just wanted them to feel it too." I reached the stairs and took them 3 at a time, bursting through the stage door into the auditorium where officers were already sweeping the aisles. They had her in custody before she made it to the landing. The chemical was mostly water and food coloring, it turned out, plus some harmless salts from the chem lab. No one was actually poisoned, but 3 teachers and 12 students went to the hospital with psychosomatic symptoms so severe they required overnight observation. The girl, her name was withheld. She was a junior I'd never noticed had been bullied in that specific science wing for 2 years according to the whispers that followed. She never explained why that day, why that method, why the elaborate performance of contamination. Ms. Holloway told me later that the girl's mother worked in industrial safety and she'd grown up hearing about leaks and exposure and panic. She knew exactly how to make belief feel like death. I still work in the shop. The filtration system still hums. But sometimes when I'm alone down there, I smell something metallic and my chest tightens before my brain catches up, and I remember her face, that terrible certainty that she'd done something irreversible, and how close I came to believing it with her.